A lot of people talk about Postal 2. The game is infamous for reasons we may never know, but I don't hear people talk about the original very often. And this one is, in my opinion, way more interesting than Postal 2. I mean, Postal 2 is crude and it's funny and like everyone loves it, but this game just has a lot more to talk about, I guess. And yes, I'm dragging this intro out as long as I possibly can so that those things don't find this video. I'm not really sure how much I can hope in that though, because a video talking about this game is pretty likely to just get instantly flagged by the algorithm on the time it publishes, so we'll just hope for the best on this one, I guess. We might as well just get into it now. This is Postal. You play as a completely deranged and unhinged man who is never named in-game and is only referred to as Demon in the credits when it lists his voice actor, going on a killing spree, shooting, setting on fire, and blowing up any and everyone who comes in his path. Hold on, did I just read that right? And yeah, that's not any sort of exaggeration, that's literally what the game is. First things first, before I get into the video, if any of you have any interest in checking the game out for yourselves because of this video, or just because you have heard of one of the Postal games before, which I'm sure you have, this game is free on Steam. At least the original one is. They have a remaster that they did a few years back, and that one costs money, but the original you can just go and download for free. It's free to keep. It's not like it's got a free weekend, nothing. It's just, you can go download it for free. It's a free game at this point. So if you have any computer, you can check this game out, because I just about guarantee you that any computer you have in your house in the year 2021 will be able to run the original Postal just fine. And just before we get through to the rest of the video, I'm just going to throw a little thing in here to say, feel free to go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff, because 97% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed, so I'm kind of trying to bring that number down a little bit, and putting these little notes in the beginning so far has helped me out doing that. So feel free to go ahead, come back. I like to talk about interesting games. That's the direction I see my channel going in the near future, so feel free to come back. But with all that being said, let's just start up the game and see what happens. Yeah. And by the way, the only editing that I did to that clip was that I lowered the volume of it because that shit's loud. Other than that, that is exactly what happens when you open it. I genuinely didn't edit it at all. And this sets the game's really weird tone from the start. In the menus, it sets this sort of tone of you playing as someone who has completely lost their shit and spiraled into this deranged insanity. But when you're actually playing the game, it has this comedic tone to it. There's stuff like, you know, you get hit by a rocket and your character will fly through the air doing flips until he lands on the ground. He has these admittedly pretty funny lines that he just randomly says as you play through the game.
Chicken ass.
But the in-game ambience is actually like nearly as disturbing as the menus are. I mean, just listen to some of this shit. Not really all that disturbing on its own, but like in the context of what is happening within the levels and what you're doing in the game, this shit's kind of fucked, honestly. The game is actually really easy, at least if you leave the difficulty at the default setting like I did. There's no like difficulty selection when you start up the game, but if you do go into the options, there's a slider that goes from 1 to 10. It's set to 5, I think, by default, and I just left it at default. That's probably what most people will do, so that's what I just did for this video. You can take a lot of bullets on the medium difficulty, and your health cap is 200, and it's not like a lot of the old school FPS games where you'd be able to get above 100 health, but then it would slowly tick down. It was just a straight up, like, you could have up to 200 health. It would be permanent, it wouldn't tick away, you just have that health. And you can actually become a bit of a walking tank if you just take few enough shots, especially on the early levels where there's just a lot of health and armor pickups. it's really easy to just kind of get to a point where you can run around and not care at all if you're getting shot or not. The levels are also populated with a lot of civilians, and I mean like half of the levels in the game have just as many civilians as they do armed enemies, which, while you're never directly encouraged to kill the civilians, there is a population count in the top left corner while you play, and that, along with just the context of the game, it does mean that the player is kind of indirectly encouraged to clear out the entire population of each level, which, for the record, I did for this video. I not only cleared all the hostile enemies out of each level, I completely cleared every level, population 0 on every level in the game, because I feel like that's kind of what you're supposed to do. And that can lead to a bit of an issue when you're playing through this, because typically you get to a point every level where like you get down to 1 or 2 population left and you just can't find that last person. And for most people that's fine, because you can actually exit the levels once you just hit a certain amount of the enemies killed, not even just the civilians, just the enemies have to be killed. But in my case, where I was really set on like 100% clearing every level, it was really annoying to get to the end of every single level and have to run around searching for that last civilian that was just wandering somewhere. And I don't want to get too much into this, but I just want to throw out there that I have really no problem with violence in video games. I grew up on violent video games from a very young age. I've turned out perfectly fine, so I really don't have a problem with it. But even I tend to get a little disturbed by a game that is literally just a, mass murder sim, essentially. Like, you know how people kind of just say, oh, this game is blah 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 simulator. Like, this is like mass shooting simulator. That's pretty much what this is. So even though I'm not someone who's super against that sort of thing, that's kind of what this is, and it really stands out as being, a game of that nature that actually managed to get some traction. And it's really interesting that there's something like that, because if I remember right, there was like a school shooter simulator that was being worked on a few years ago, but that never like came to light. The project never really caught on, but this did. It's really, really interesting. And I'm mainly bringing this up because what I do want to talk about with it is that we all know those parents and those politicians that lobby against violence in video games, right? Well, can you imagine how much worse things would have been for us today if back in like 1997 to like early 2000-ish, they had chosen this game as one of like their primary targets. Luckily for us, this game flew pretty much under the radar until its sequel came out, and even that game got most of the attention once it did. But this game came out about a year before the Columbine shooting, so you can just kind of imagine what would have happened if those parents and those politicians had chosen to focus on this in the wake of those events instead of like Doom, which is a lot harder to kind of sell as being similar to what happened in that Colorado school. But circling back to what I was saying about having the last civilian stuck somewhere in the level and how that could be frustrating, the level design is actually one of the weakest parts of the game. You pretty much get spawned into a large square area that you run around every level, and you just kind of kill until you reach that minimum amount required to teleport to the next level, and then you leave. And there's no real flow to these levels. They're just kind of these big boxes. Most of them take place in like city streets. There's buildings all throughout the middle, and you kind of have to go through the streets in between the buildings, all that stuff. But there's no like actual flow. It's just a giant grid that gets populated with enemies, and that's it. You just kind of go around that until you're done. And it's pretty disappointing considering how amazing level design was in the late 90s for a lot of these games that were really taking off back then. Luckily, the weapons make up for the lack of interesting levels, because you start out with an assault rifle that has infinite ammo, and while it's not very good, it's an automatic weapon with infinite ammo, so you kind of have to love this thing. I mean, come on. From there, you go up to a shotgun, you get frag grenades, a rocket launcher, Molotovs. There's a grenade launcher that shoots out like incendiary shells that just lay out this giant flame wall straight in the direction you shot it. And that thing is awesome if you've got enemies lined up, because you just light them all on fire in one straight shot. It's really cool. There's a full auto version of the shotgun that will chew through your ammo, but it'll just mow enemies down. And there's even a goddamn flamethrower. I mean, come on. If you're gonna make a mass shooting simulator, you have to at least put a flamethrower in there, right? The one thing with the weapons, though, is that the ammo is pretty lacking for most of them, and I find that for more than half of the game, I was just using the assault rifle because I just didn't have ammo in anything else. I think having more ammo pickups would have made the game a lot easier, but I also feel like to balance it out, you could have just put more enemies in the levels, and that would have worked out fine. And maybe there was a sort of thing with like processing power of computers or just the engine. And if that's the case, I would say take out some of the civilians because there are so many civilians in a lot of these levels and they're not really necessary. They're just there to kill if you choose to. Again, they're not central to the gameplay. So I think having more ammo but also having more enemies would have just made the game more interesting all around, because being able to use your awesome weapons more often and not just get stuck with the assault rifle that barely does any damage, and having more enemies to use them against, like, I just don't really see a downside. I think all around it would have made it a much more interesting game. Overall, the game is very interesting, but it's not the most, like, amazing game. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how well designed it is. It's just, it's a game, and it's really interesting to look at for what it is and talk about it in the sense of, you know, a game of this nature came out and was able to become popular, and somehow mass media didn't lose their fucking mind over it, right? But the game itself just, it's mediocre. It's not an amazing game. It's fun enough. Thankfully, it's short, which if you just play through this game once and then you kind of just forget it exists, you're gonna have a blast, because playing through every level in the game takes like 2 hours. And if you download that free version that is on Steam for the original, it also comes packaged with the original expansion called Special Delivery, which adds an extra 4 levels into the game, as well as a couple of levels from Super Postal, which is the Japanese port of the original Postal, that even has a Tokyo level and an Osaka level included, just for that special flair for that Japanese audience, I guess. Because, of course, you would want to shoot up one of your home cities, not just some made-up city, right? But I do want to add that I do see the artistic value of how this game portrays the nature of what it is, because it doesn't portray it in a good light. There is some comedy to it. There's some sort of tongue-in-cheek jokes in there that a lot of people really wouldn't appreciate, and I get that. But to me, you know, they definitely don't portray the Postal Dude, or I guess just the demon as he was referred to in this game, as like a positive character in any way, other than just he says funny stuff sometimes, like when he says chicken ass or butt sauce randomly when you're killing people, like that's funny, haha. But like, he's not portrayed as a good character. He's definitely made out to be evil and nothing other than that. Okay, maybe funny other than that, but evil overall is. The one thing that I really liked about this game and was very impressed by was actually the ending of it. And I'm not going to spoil it here, but I will say that if you play the game for yourself, definitely make sure that you don't skip the ending. It's actually a really good one, and it's an ending that kind of makes you feel empty in a way when you finish the game. And I don't want to say much more than that. Again, I don't want to spoil it, so just play it yourself. But like, it's a very interesting way to leave the game off, is kind of what I'm trying to say. If you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about, and it's actually a really cool way to end the game. And just as a footnote here near the end, performance was pretty good running on a Windows 10 system actually, but there was one time I crashed. But all things considered, this is just running straight. I didn't modify any files or anything. I didn't download a fan patch. Like, I didn't do any of that. I just downloaded the game. It's a 97 game, and you know, it ran on Windows 10. It crashed once. So all things considered, that's pretty good. Even if that was in 2 hours of playtime, it's only one crash for a game this old, so I'll take it. And now, with all that being said, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, if you did enjoy, feel free to go ahead and leave a like, a comment, or a subscription. Any of those would be greatly appreciated. If you're interested in coming over and watching some stuff on Twitch, feel free to do that. Twitch is my main platform. I'll have a link to my channel on screen and the description below. We just hang out, play games, do the same thing over there that we do here pretty much. So feel free to come and hang out. But aside from that, I hope to see all of you guys back here next time. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.